He's a thug with a mop, always has been. And frankly, I don't know why the city keeps paying people like him to be anywhere near decent neighborhoods. That was the first thing Councilman Aldridge Fenn said when the cameras turned to him. He didn't hesitate, didn't blink, just straightened his tie and let it land. The man he was talking about was standing 40 feet away, on the other side of a glass partition, wearing a gray jumpsuit with his wrists zip-tied in front of him. His name was Solomon Tate. He was 31 years old. He had been a city janitor for 9 years, worked the night shift at Branton City Hall, and had never once been late. He was also, as of 6 hours ago, under arrest for aggravated assault, theft, and trespassing. None of it was true, but that part comes later. The night it happened was a Tuesday in February, the kind of cold that doesn't announce itself. It just settles into your bones and stays. Solomon clocked in at 10 p.m., the way he always did. Signed the sheet at the front desk, nodded at Fredericks, the overnight guard, grabbed his cart from the supply closet on the basement level. The usual. He'd done it so many times the routine had become a kind of silence, something he moved through without thinking. He liked the building at night. That was the truth of it. During the day, the place was full of noise, the clatter of city business, the entitled shuffle of people who believed their time mattered more than anyone else's. But at night, it emptied out. The marble floors caught the fluorescent light and glowed faintly. The hallways stretched quiet and long. Solomon could think in a place like that. He was on the 3rd floor, near the east corridor, when he heard something. Not a crash, not a cry, just a sound that didn't belong, a low, confused murmuring coming from behind the door of Aldridge Fenn's office suite. The door was cracked open, which was unusual. Fenn's assistant always locked it before leaving. Solomon stopped his cart, listened, the murmuring again. Then a soft thud, like something being knocked from a shelf. He pushed the door open slowly. The office was dark, except for the ambient glow from the street below, bleeding in through the tall windows, and there, sitting on the floor beside Fenn's desk, was a woman. She was elderly, mid-80s at least, Solomon guessed, wearing a cream-colored wool coat and one leather shoe. The other shoe was nowhere he could see. She had a small handbag clutched to her chest, and she was looking up at him with an expression that was not quite fear and not quite recognition. "Charles?" she said. "Is that you, Charles?" Solomon crouched down slowly so he wouldn't frighten her. "No, ma'am. My name's Solomon. Are you all right?" She looked at her hands, then at the room. "I'm looking for the bathroom," she said. "I got turned around." She'd gotten more than turned around. She was in a locked government building after midnight, alone, sitting on the floor of a city councilman's private office. Her breathing was shallow. There was a small cut on her palm, probably from the window ledge she'd apparently climbed through. One of the lower windows on the east side had been left unlatched. Solomon would piece that together later. At the time, all he knew was that there was an old woman on the floor and she needed help. He sat down beside her, not looming over her, just sat. "Can you tell me your name?" She thought about it for a long moment. "Eugenia," she said. "Eugenia Marsh." "Okay, Eugenia, I'm Solomon. I work here at night. You're safe." He paused. "Do you know where you live?" She started to answer, then stopped, looked at the window. "I was looking for Charles," she said again. "He said he'd be home by supper." Solomon stayed with her for 2 hours. He called 911 within the first few minutes. That part is important, because later, people would claim he hadn't. The operator told him an ambulance was en route. But there'd been a multi-vehicle accident on the bridge, and response times were stretched. He stayed on the line, then gave his name and badge number when asked, and waited. He got Eugenia a cup of water from the small kitchen down the hall, found a throw blanket folded on the office sofa, and set it around her shoulders. Talked to her about small things. What the weather had been like, whether she preferred coffee or tea, what her favorite flower was. She said dahlias. Her daughter used to grow them along the fence. Solomon told her his grandmother had grown dahlias too, which was true. Somewhere around midnight, Eugenia said she was tired, and she leaned her head against his shoulder, and he let her, and didn't move. The paramedics arrived at 12:47 a.m. They assessed her, found her vitals stable, and loaded her into the ambulance. Solomon gave his full statement to the responding officer. A young patrolman named Osi signed the incident report and went back to finish his shift. He thought that was the end of it. Aldridge Fenn arrived at his office the next morning to find the security footage flagged, a police report on his assistant's desk, and the news that a city maintenance worker had spent several hours alone in his private office in the middle of the night. Fenn didn't ask what the maintenance worker had been doing there. He didn't call the hospital to check on Eugenia Marsh. He didn't speak to OC or review the 911 call log. What he did, within 45 minutes of arriving, was call his attorney and his press contact in that order. By 10 a.m., the story had shifted. By noon, Solomon Tate was in handcuffs. The charges: aggravated assault of an elderly woman, theft. A bracelet had been reported missing from Eugenia's wrist, a gold one, and someone had noted Solomon's cart had been found near the office. Trespassing in a restricted area. The local news ran with it fast. A photograph appeared. Solomon's work ID badge photo, the kind nobody looks good in, next to a photo of Eugenia Marsh from what appeared to be a family Christmas gathering, smiling in a red sweater. The contrast was deliberate. It didn't need a caption. City janitor arrested after elderly woman found assaulted in councilman's office. That was the headline. Solomon's mother saw it on her phone at her second job, the one she worked on Tuesday afternoons at the dry cleaner on Beaumont Street. She dropped her phone, picked it up, read it again, sat down in the chair near the steam press and put her face in her hands. Solomon's supervisor at the city received a call from HR before Solomon had even been processed. He was suspended without pay pending investigation. His key card was deactivated. His locker was searched. His cart, the cart he'd used every shift for 4 years, was photographed and catalogued as potential evidence. And somewhere on the other side of town, in a room that smelled like antiseptic and chamomile, Eugenia Marsh was sitting up in a hospital bed, asking the nurse if Charles had come by yet, and whether the dahlias were blooming. Solomon spent 3 days in county before his mother could scrape together the bail. He didn't say much when she came to get him, just hugged her in the parking lot. A long one, the kind that doesn't need words. She kept her hand on his back the whole drive home. At home, the news alerts kept coming. Fenn had given another statement. He expressed deep concern for the safety of City Hall staff and visitors alike, and announced he was pushing for a review of the vetting process for overnight maintenance personnel. He did not name Solomon directly. He didn't need to. Solomon sat at the kitchen table and looked at his hands. His public defender, a woman named Aguilar who had 17 other cases and a broken briefcase clasp, told him to stay off social media, stay home, and not talk to anyone. She reviewed the 911 call transcript. She noted the responding officer's report. She said the evidence in his favor was there, but that the optics were complicated. "What does that mean?" Solomon asked. Aguilar chose her words carefully. "It means who you are on paper and who you look like to the people deciding are two different things right now." He understood. His trial date was set for 6 weeks out. 6 weeks of suspension. 6 weeks of his name attached to a headline that wasn't true. 6 weeks of neighbors who'd known him since he was 11 years old, finding reasons not to make eye contact at the mailbox. His mother stopped watching the local news. He started waking up at 3 a.m. and not being able to go back to sleep. Eugenia Marsh had a daughter named Phyllis. Phyllis was 53, lived 40 minutes from her mother, and had been the one to file the missing person report. The night Eugenia wandered, she'd been frantic. She'd called the police 3 times before they told her the ambulance had been dispatched. She'd driven to the hospital and sat beside her mother until 4 a.m., holding her hand while Eugenia asked about Charles and dahlias. Phyllis also read the headline. She read it twice, slowly, and then she opened the attached police report because she had a friend who could access the public record version. And she read through it carefully, and when she got to the part where Solomon had called 911, stayed on the line, given his badge number, retrieved water, and signed a full incident report at the scene. She put the report down on her kitchen table and sat very still for a moment. The bracelet, she knew, had not been on her mother's wrist when Eugenia left the house that evening. Phyllis had noticed because she'd meant to remind her mother to wear it for a family lunch that weekend. It was still at home on the dresser. It had never been in the building. She called Fenn's office first. She was put on hold, transferred twice, and then told that the councilman was unavailable and could she please leave a message with his assistant. She did not leave a message. She called the DA's office instead. She spoke to a clerk. She was told the case was under review. She asked how she could submit a formal statement as the victim's next of kin. She was given an email address. Then she called her sister, Wren, who was a paralegal, and she called her colleague from her years working hospital administration, a woman named Dr. Fontaine, who had testified as an expert witness in elder care cases before, and who, when Phyllis explained the situation, said, "Send me everything you have." 3 women. 48 hours. The morning of Solomon's preliminary hearing, the courtroom was half full. Local journalists sat in the second row. Fenn's attorney was at the prosecutor's table, consulting in low tones. Solomon sat beside Aguilar in his only good blazer, the one his mother had pressed twice that morning. He looked straight ahead. He had learned, in the weeks since the arrest, to keep his face very still in public, not because he had anything to hide, but because he had learned that expressions on his face, worry, frustration, even simple tiredness, got reported as agitation or defiance by people who had decided before looking what they were going to see. So he kept his face still and his hands flat on the table, and he waited. The judge was a woman named the Honorable Cecilia Drum, 61 years old, who had been on the bench for 19 years, and who had, over those 19 years, developed a particular sensitivity to cases that smelled a certain way. This one had been smelling wrong to her since it landed on her docket. The charge sheet was aggressive for what the incident report described. The timeline didn't hold, and the 911 call. She'd listened to it herself, which was not something she typically did before a preliminary. Did not sound like a man committing a crime. It sounded like a man trying very hard to do the right thing in a situation nobody had prepared him for. She was about 40 minutes into the hearing when the door at the back of the courtroom opened. 3 women walked in. Phyllis first, in a dark coat, carrying a folder. Behind her, Wren, in reading glasses with a document binder, and beside them, Dr. Fontaine, who had written a 6-page clinical statement on Eugenia Marsh's documented Alzheimer's progression. The likelihood that her nocturnal wandering was consistent with known behavioral patterns, and the medical improbability of the assault charges given Eugenia's account, which, when lucid, she had given clearly and twice to hospital staff. That statement had been submitted to the court the previous afternoon. Judge Drum had read it that morning over coffee. Phyllis requested to address the court as the victim's primary next of kin and legal medical proxy. Drum granted it. Phyllis stood at the podium. She did not raise her voice. She did not perform distress. She simply read from the document she'd assembled. The bracelet that had been home all along, confirmed by a time-stamped photo from her mother's security camera the morning of the incident. Eugenia's own words, recorded by a nurse during a moment of clarity 2 days after admission. "The young man was kind. He got me water. He talked to me about flowers." The 911 transcript. Solomon's badge record, showing 9 years of clean service. A letter from Officer Osi confirming the incident report had been filed accurately and that Solomon had been cooperative throughout. She set the documents down when she was finished. "My mother is not a prop," Phyllis said, "and the man who stayed with her on that floor when she was confused and scared and alone, that man deserves to go home." The courtroom was quiet. Judge Drum looked at the prosecutor's table. She looked at the charge sheet in front of her. She looked at Solomon Tate, who was sitting very still with his hands flat on the table. Then she laughed. It was not a mean laugh. It wasn't dismissive. It was the particular laugh of someone who has just confirmed what they already suspected. The kind of laugh that escapes when absurdity and truth arrive at the same moment. She caught it quickly, composed herself, and when she spoke again, her voice was level. "Counsel," she said to the prosecution, "I'm going to need you to explain to me how this case reached my courtroom." There was a long pause. "Because from what I'm reading, the city's own maintenance worker responded appropriately to an emergency in a government building, rendered aid to a vulnerable adult, contacted emergency services immediately, cooperated fully with law enforcement, and has since lost his income and his reputation over a bracelet that never left the victim's house." She set the file down. "That is not a crime. That is the kind of citizen the city should be thanking." She dismissed all 3 charges. She also requested, on the record, that the city's legal office review the circumstances that led to the filing and that Councilman Fenn's involvement in initiating the charges be examined. It took 11 minutes. Solomon walked out of the courthouse into the February light, and the cold hit him the same way it had the night. All of this started, settling in around the edges. His mother was waiting at the bottom of the steps. She didn't say anything. She just held his face in her hands for a moment, the way she used to when he was small and had fallen off his bike, checking that everything was still where it belonged. Phyllis found him on the sidewalk. I'm sorry it took as long as it did, she said. Solomon shook his head. You didn't have to do any of that. Yes, I did, she said simply. Wren was behind her, already on her phone, and Dr. Fontaine was talking to Aguilar near the courthouse steps. Phyllis looked back at them and then at Solomon and said, Your mother raised someone who sat on a cold floor with a scared old woman and talked to her about flowers. That mattered to my family. I wanted you to know that. He thanked her. He didn't quite have the words for more than that. Later, the city reinstated Solomon's position with full back pay. A formal inquiry into the charge's origin found that Fenn's attorney had pressured the DA's office to file before the evidence had been adequately reviewed. Fenn did not seek re-election that November. He cited personal reasons. The bracelet was given to Phyllis, who put it on her mother's wrist at the family lunch that spring, and Eugenia held her hand up to the light and said it was pretty and meant it. Solomon went back to work. He clocked in at 10 p.m., the way he always did, signed the sheet, nodded at Fredericks, grabbed his cart from the supply closet in the basement, the usual. He moved through the quiet building, the marble floors glowing faintly in the overnight light, and for a while it was enough just to be there again, to be trusted again, to be part of something ordinary and decent, and his. There's a sanitation worker on your route, a janitor in your office building, a bus driver who remembers your stop without being asked, a home health aide who shows up in the cold because someone needs them. They're not asking for recognition. Most of them never do. But the next time you pass one of them in a hallway, or on a sidewalk, or on the way to somewhere you've decided matters more, remember Solomon. Remember what it cost him to do the right thing. And remember that 3 women with folders and facts and the courage to show up changed everything in 11 minutes. Kindness is easy to perform. What's harder and rarer is defending it when it's easier not to.